You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture and all things related to it. New episodes are released daily. For more information, check out glossahouse.com and subscribe to our channels on Spotify and YouTube. Welcome and enjoy.
Shalom, this is Dr. Jennifer Noonan, and I welcome you to this week's SLA Insight. I'm continuing a conversation that I started several weeks ago about structured input, which is a way of manipulating input in such a way to maximize a student's intake from the comprehensible input that they're receiving. It's a way of increasing the quality of comprehensible input. And I've been working through the different guidelines that Van Patten, Farley, Cadierno have put together for how you create these structured input activities. This is part of Van Patten's processing instruction, which has three components: explicit grammar information that you give to the students, information about default processing strategies, which I covered a couple weeks ago, and then structured input activities, which by far are the most important component of this processing instruction. So with structured input activities, you want to follow certain guidelines. And the last couple episodes, I covered the first two. One is present one thing at a time. The second guideline is to keep meaning and focus. Now this week, I'm going to cover the third guideline and hopefully help you with some more practical ideas of what it might look like and how to make this work as you try to develop structured input activities. So the third guideline is move from sentences to connected discourse. Now, this third guideline, on one hand, is once again closely related to Creation's input hypothesis, the I+1, where you have input that is 1 degree more difficult than the learner's current stage. So you do want to be increasing the difficulty and complexity of the input that you provide your students, but you do it slowly, introducing one new thing at a time. However, on the other side of things, it's also this guideline is also encouraging you to not stop at the sentence level. So you want to move beyond that and practice the new material, the target structure, in extended reading or listening contexts. So the way I think of it is kind of in levels, where level 1 might be a 1 to 2 word sentence. Level 2 then is a more complex sentence. Level 3, you're moving into discourse with like 1 to 3 sentences. And then level 4 is more complex or extended discourse. And so if you kind of can work through those levels, you're going to be following this principle where you move from the simpler to the more complex. So let's give an example where, say, the target structure is the Hebrew perfect or katal form in the third masculine singular. And so at level 1, because the verb includes the subject, you can work with a one-word sentence in Hebrew and use just the word by itself, and start here where you can maximize or minimize distractions, maximize the student's working memory, attentional resources, and so on. So you maintain just a limited focus on this form and its function, and then gradually build into new vocabulary words. So you might start with katav, for example, he wrote, and then move into others, bana, halak, whatever, to add one thing at a time, but you're moving forward. So that would be level 1, where you just focus on the verb itself, starting just with a single one-word sentence. Level 2 then, where you might add other components to the sentence. You might add an explicit subject. You might add objects. You might add dependent clauses. So you might add, for example, bana bayit, he built a house. So you're starting to add complexity to that, but you can make it more complex depending on where your students are, what they know. Again, subjects, dependent clauses, after 3 days, he built a house, or whatever it is that will continue to add complexity, but still maintaining a focus just on that third masculine singular form. Level 3 then is where you start moving into discourse. So looking at a brief dialogue, a brief story, something fairly short, but with more than one sentence at a time. So just as a quick example, you might say, Mi bana et habait, who built the house? And then David bana et habait, David built the house. And so working into gradually expanding the levels of discourse, making it a little more complex. Level 4 then would be a more complex story or dialogue where you're expanding on that very brief interaction that I gave earlier. I'm not going to take the time to expand and make a whole story out of it, but you get the idea. This is what we're doing to move again from simple sentences to more complex connected discourse. And this is the third guideline for how you create structured input activities and how you develop this within processing instruction. So again, this is one component, one guideline for creating structured input activities. It's the third of 6 that we're working towards. So just as a quick review, so far we've covered 1, present one thing at a time, 2, keep meaning in focus, and then today, 3, move from sentences to connected discourse. And again, the goal of these structured input activities is to improve the quality of comprehensible input, helping students to really focus in on the target structure and derive more intake from the input to help them acquire the language and develop that fluency that they need, proficiency. So next week, I'm going to cover the 4th guideline of 6. And so I hope you can join me with that. And in the meantime, have a great week.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.